I would rather have an application engineer with a good bend on security rather than a security engineer who knows nothing about application or infrastructure development. Issue is being fixed or the security issue is being addressed. It's difficult to find these individuals. Hiring a security person can take anywhere from 6 months to a year, a good security individual, but it's important to have those traits to be successful.
Hi, you're listening to The Secure Developer. It's part of the DevSecOn community, a platform for developers, operators, and security people to share their views and practices on DevSecOps, Dev and Sec collaboration, cloud security, and more. Check out devsecon.com to join the community and find other great resources. This podcast is sponsored by Snyk. Snyk's developer security platform helps developers build secure applications without slowing down, fixing vulnerabilities in code, open source, containers, and infrastructure as code. To learn more, visit snyk.io/TSD. That's SNYK.io/TSD.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Secure Developer. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, we're going to dig into shift left and what it really means and, maybe how to accomplish it successfully. And to do that, we have Rupa Parameswaran, who is the head of security at Amplitude. Rupa, thanks for joining us here as a guest to share your views.
Hey, Guy. Thank you very much for having me here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
So first, to tell you a little bit more about Rupa. Rupa is a security and privacy expert, has more than 20 years of sort of research and industry experience, has been building and driving trust in security programs at startups and sort of big billion-dollar brands. So we'll have a lot to learn here. And she works closely with business leaders to create kind of relevant secure by design and kind of secure by default controls that help businesses run efficiently, but also be secure. And right now she is, as I said, head of security at Amplitude. She's responsible for engineering security and incident response programs and a lot more. And we'll hear about those learnings in a moment. And Rupa's focused on shifting security left, giving engineering and DevOps teams kind of relevant training, timely alerts, and just the right recommendation for remediating security flaws and misconfigurations as they develop, has really successfully transformed the security mindsets in the engineering teams at Amplitude and how they work. So we'll dig a lot into the secret sauce here, right, and the learnings and how that has actually transpired. And just to note that, while we're going to focus maybe on some Amplitude examples and activities, a lot of learnings come from Rupa's previous experience as a CISO at Demandbase and in general, kind of working as security and privacy architect at Pinterest, Microsoft, EMC, and more. So again, Rupa, thanks for, this is tons and tons of sort of experience for us to tap into here. And let's sort of dig in maybe with some terminology, shift left, you have to sort of love and hate buzzwords as they do it. When you hear shift left, at least in the context of security, what does that mean to you? How do you define it?
Thanks for the introductions. Shift left to me means bringing security closer and closer to the business owners, making them more aware of what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and how it can be done. Where it's almost like bringing a horse to the water and you show them how to drink. You can't put the water into the mouth and make sure that they're thirsty. They know their appetite for thirst. They know when the water is not good enough for them, but you bring them close enough so they can make the right calls. Because to me, the business owner is the best suited to either make a decision on whether that risk is acceptable or not. And what we as security leaders need to do is to teach them or let them know what the risk is, what the issue is, how it can manifest itself, and give the business owner the wherewithals to how to address the risk if they agree with our risk assessment. If they don't, then we learn and we help them put in controls so that the risk will show up when it's a real risk. Where you've said, okay, it's not a risk right now, but if A, B, and C come together, then it becomes a risk. So that's what I mean by shifting security left. And that ties in very nicely with my perception of security, which is it is a continuous process. Security, there's never I'm done with security, let's move on. Security is a journey. It's a continuous process. You keep looking at things, new threats will keep coming in, you keep assessing them, You keep evaluating what the risks are, and then you keep implementing controls where it's like vulnerability detection, identification, detection, protection. But the incidents will always happen. You remediate that, you identify what the indicators of compromise are, and then you push it back to now it's a normal vulnerability and it's this level. So it goes back into the pipeline. So as you can see, what I've defined is really a circle as your world, right? Things you can start at the very right, you can start at the very left. You go through it. Every time you may have to loop back. And that's what is shifting security left. And the more and more you can move security left, get people trained and with an understanding of what these risks are, the earlier they can accommodate it into their learning process, into their design process, and reduce the number of hurdles you would have or obstacles you would have in your path to delivery.
There's a bunch of things I like about the definition. One of them is you used business owner. You didn't say developers. You sort of said business owners. It's the people making the decision. So I really like that. I relate to it. It's really boils down to bringing the security knowledge closer to the decision maker, to the person in practical. So I really like that. But I guess kind of a question a bit, how much do you think, you talk about understanding the risk. How much is it about understanding the risk? And maybe how does that compare to the ease of becoming aware of the risk or the ease of doing something about it?
Beautiful. Love that question. Thanks for catching on to the fact that I called it out as a business owner, because there are different ways to showcase the risk to the owners at different levels, right? So if I was speaking to an engineering manager or a leader or a director or even a CTO, for instance, I would call it out as, hey, this is your crown jewel. For most small businesses, it's typically their production environment, production application. The risk vectors, I would call it out on a generic level, right? How can someone get spearphished, bring in malware into a device? That device is a device belonging to an engineer. That engineer is hitting production. That gets into your EC2 instances, and voila, you have ransomware there. An engineer will not be able to take that and put that into, hey, there is an issue. I need to make sure my application, or I have my containers and I have my container images scanning for malware or anything. So with them, I'll put together a demo. I'll put together an application, a malicious web application, and I'll walk them through a demo with an engineering person to showcase and make sure that that demo that I put together triggers an alert on your container scanning, triggers an alert when the individual is on his IDE writing his code. And without any other context, that engineer is going to say, hey, I have all of these other security groups. I have all of these other container images, vulnerabilities. What's this new one? I'm just going to suppress it and move on. The important part is to have that one meeting or that one demo with the engineering team where you're showcasing, hey, before you switch that off, look at this demonstration that I have. See if it's applicable. Just read that alert a little more. Is it nuanced? Is it something new? Or is it something existing? If it's something existing, call it out and then suppress it. Otherwise, see what could happen. But you need to build that trust. You need to get there that the engineer now thinks about, hey, could this be a problem? Should I look at it? And then in the initial stages, chances are they could get it wrong. Have ways in which they could reach out to you, talk to you about it, let you help them understand and differentiate between, hey, we can suppress this, hey, we cannot, which will require a little bit of monitoring on the security side, where we'll have to see whether they're doing the right thing. So maybe an alert when things are suppressed. But once that becomes a well-oiled machine, you can let them go. And they will thank you for that. They will thank you for the learning because you're not hindering their processes. They know what to do. It's only when there's something new that they don't understand or a new initiative that they're working on, they will bring you in because they know you're going to help them shift security left. So they don't have to either avoid things and be stuck with having to pay a bounty or be stuck with you having to review things like after a 10-day SLA that you have because you have a whole pile of issues to take care of.
Yeah, you're very much highlighting the importance of contextualizing, almost like risk context, right? I sometimes talk about the difference between application context, which oftentimes security people forget to sort of offer developers. You just think about risk. But when you think about the developer, like showing some sort of end-to-end kind of understanding of the problem, I guess just to clarify, do you aim to have this type of like end-to-end simulation for every alert you're sort of providing developers, or is the intent more to, just sort of open their eyes to potential risks and show them that on like a sample set of issues, so they just generally are not quite as readily dismissive of the alerts that come in?
Yes. So that's an interesting problem to solve. I would say it's important to feed security in a little at a time, and then make sure that the team has an appetite. I mean, understand what kind of appetite a team has, right? Different teams would have different appetites for security. Someone who's a senior engineer who just thinks about cranking up things and who's been taking risks until today, who has like 10 years of experience, for instance, who's been working on things, has a mindset already in terms of like, what's an acceptable risk, what's not, what my business likes, what my customers like. Their risk acceptance, or the amount that they could be hindered or asked to take a look at new risks or new alerts that come up, is very small. So you need to pick your battles as a security person. Do that initial level of triaging, which is another topic that we can talk about, is alert fatigue, where the security team needs to make sure at the time of investing in building out that program and shifting security left, what's the easiest way to get into the good books of the engineers? So just show or allow for the alerts to reach the engineers if they pass that threshold, if it's critical, if it's high. For that, define what critical and high means. Define why they're critical and high. Therefore, they know what to look for. They understand these completely, and they're able to take care of them. Once you realize these little things are well understood, then you open up the mouth. What I mean is increase the diameter of that hole, right? And in terms of like add more items to that bucket a little at a time. It has to be slightly linear at first, right? And then you can expand it exponentially. Once you realize that they're at the same level of the security team, you can then open up the pipe and let the whole thing flow in on the IDE, where people are getting warnings. And once it gets into the production pipeline, you tighten the controls a little bit in terms of what you can suppress and what you cannot. But that's where the security team needs to work, understand appetite of the engineering teams, understand how many people there are, how much they can take in, the maturity of the teams, and then work on that sweet spot in terms of how much is acceptable at this point of time, what the roadmap should be. It's important to have a roadmap in terms of introducing security left as well. Got it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think implied a little bit in what you were saying is that the security team needs to be fairly consistent. So you would have, if I'm kind of echoing it correctly, you would have taken the security team or sort of the engineering team, demonstrated to them a couple of bad scenarios end to end about critical vulnerabilities. And then when you tell them about critical vulnerabilities, which hopefully is a small enough number, you're reasonably consistent that when they see a critical vulnerability, they should address it with sort of that level of severity. And then as you do that, the second point you make is, you can't drown them right away. You have to indoctrinate them a bit sort of into the process as they build those out. And you've done this a bunch of times now. Are there magic numbers in your mind of like how many is too many that you use as a guideline?
The first thing to do is to do the first level of triage. The security team, at least at the onset of the program, the security team needs to do that initial triage, customize the language. And there's no sweet number, right? So hopefully a company is at a state where the number of criticals that would come in would be at the most one a week. Right? I mean, that's huge too, but at the most one a week, like in terms of infrastructure, once it's triaged. It's not like, once you set up any kind of scan tool or vulnerability management tool, it's going to puke out a whole bunch of issues. Are they all really critical? Are they all critical in your environment? Maybe not. Maybe it is. But that's where it's important for all of these tools, the different tools, whether it is your dynamic scanner, your static scanner, your IAST, whether it's your cloud infrastructure scanner, all of these would be nice if you have all of these tools, the information being ingested from all of these tools, being put in context, and for the security team to come up with, hey, these three are critical because of all of these dependencies, right? And we define critical as XYZ. In which case, if there are 10 in the beginning, so be it. The teams will get the 10. The security team will work in concert with the engineers, maybe even drive those, lead those, and help fix them, get that buy-in, and then make sure that just the criticals, the SLAs are met, and then move into highs.
Yeah. I really like it because I feel there's often a challenge between, on one hand, you want the engineers are doing a lot of things and you want the security team to simplify security. And one way to do that is by taking the labor of triaging vulnerabilities to them. On the other hand, there aren't enough security people. It's kind of that's not a kind of viable solution. You can never really keep up. And so you want engineers to do it. So I like the model that you're proposing here, which is at the beginning, take the burden on, do some things manually. Startup lingo, you talk about start by doing things that don't scale. That's okay. You started, but you kind of make the model work, you build those out, but you need to always do that with an eye and I guess an expectation setting in the engineering team that like you're spoon feeding them right now, but they need to start preparing for being able to do some of those finessing themselves, right? And I mean, if I'm correct about that, how do you ready them for that sort of phase 2 of the program here?
Right. There's a part where you're spoon feeding them at first. And that's where a good security engineer will learn to automate himself or herself out of that. Will start building the tooling for transferring what he or she is thinking about in terms of, why am I considering this to be a high risk or a critical risk? And translating that into code, right? So if I'm able to build the tool to say, hey, I'm taking an input from all of these other tools, and if the thresholds pass, if I could mount an attack or my likelihood for impact and my exposure is larger because of these 3 things, can I codify it? Or is there a tool over there, either open source or proprietary, that's doing that? If that is, can I bring that in and improve that tool so that the tool is now the one that's, I wouldn't say spoon feeding, but at least helping set a little additional context to the engineer, and the engineer is able to take it from there and run with it. So make myself dispensable and then look for another challenge to work on.
Got it. Okay. So you don't.
That's what makes a good engineer, which is where the retention for the security team comes into play as well, right? Give them something to do that they can showcase, that they can be great at, then go to present at a B-Sides or a Black Hat or what have you, right? That's a learning curve, and the retention and building out the security team comes in.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. So that's a great clarification, because you're saying the application engineer, the sort of the application developers, you actually don't expect them to encounter the fire hose at any stage. You expect the security team to initially manually triage and then increasingly automate that triage. But even when the team matures, is there a point in which you need the application development team to be able to cope with larger volumes of issues?
The thinking there is that as the maturity level of the application engineers increase, or the infrastructure engineers increases, the solutions that they will be building would be addressing the legacy of the critical or the high issues that will play in very nicely with resolving or addressing the fire hose of issues that hasn't been sent to them already. So that fire hose will automatically, or the pool will automatically come down. So now, unless there's a new log4j, there wouldn't be another fire hose that comes down their pipe.
Got it. Okay. So this is an actual improvement. You're sort of correlating the actual improvement of security with the readiness to sort of take on security from the team's perspective. Hopefully, just a lot of these things have been around. In your mind, what are the time kind of, how long, you're coming into an organization that's, let's say it's not in disaster state, but the development team hasn't embraced security and you're looking to go through this process. How quickly do you think it's reasonable to get to a state in which there isn't heavy manual triage by the security team?
It depends, is what I would say. It's easy to get a great win, a good jumpstart in light, if you're able to piggyback or strike while the iron is hot, is what I would say. Things like the log4j, for instance, or an issue like that, where the security team showcases, comes up as a leader, is working with everyone, creating awareness in terms of why it's an issue, what's an issue, going and resolving it. So there's an appetite that understanding of, hey, security is something we need to think about, comes in as important. And having said that, Some teams will be more amenable. I mean, even within your engineering team, depending on how each business organizes business engineering teams. If there's 10, if there's 15, if there's one, there would be some that are more amenable to take on security upfront, some that are not, where it's important to build your allies. And this is not just technical, but build your allies, show key wins, and create those champions in those teams that are your allies and help them spread the security awareness and the winnings along. I would say it could take up to a year to get that security buy-in across the company and get everyone to understand that it is important. Again, in terms of the maturity or the development life cycle as well. If someone's working on a new feature and a brand new product, that's an easy way for security to come in and try to get security all the way to the left. Yes, it's always challenging with timelines and deliverables, but that's an easy way to try and build in a relationship with everyone from the product manager to the engineering manager to whoever else is a stakeholder in driving that development culture and get that through. That rather than in something that's completely baked, a feature that's just like an underlying backdrop or like a middleware feature or like a component that 10 teams are using where one small change to that framework or to that platform is going to cause issues which nobody knows about because it's legacy. No one wants to touch it. So those are areas where security will have to work a little closer with the engineers or the infrastructure leads to understand timeline to fix those things.
Yeah, I like how you suggest changing it because it kind of maps a bit more to how dev tools are adopted versus how security controls somewhat are rolled out. There tends to be a bias in favor of insecurity. There tends to be a bias in favor of rolling out breadth first and just get everybody to a threshold before you go off and invest in having certain teams get to a higher level of competence. I think you're suggesting something that is more akin to how dev tools get adopted, which is you have certain teams that lead the charge, they succeed, the organizations sees they succeed, and so other teams kind of lean into that as well, right? Easier for them to accept it. Is that right?
Yes, and that's where the champions come in. We want engineers and other business owners, business teams, the doers to become champions and to be able to speak the security language and to bring new issues or new concerns or considerations to the security team.
Yeah.
Because the security team cannot scale as much as engineering team, right?
So actually, that's a great segue. So like, I love the model. Maybe we get like a bit more specific to sort of Amplitude and some of the things that you're talking about. And indeed, one of the things I know you're doing is this notion of security champions. So tell us a bit about that sort of framework program, what it is.
Right. That's a topic that's that's a pet project for me wherever I go, because it's very difficult to hire security talent. And security engineers or the security team is often strapped for resources, and we're often the ones that are a bottleneck, which is why the engineering teams or whichever other business unit wants to avoid having to get to security because it's not scalable. How do we solve the problem? It's about building that relationship. As we shift security left, it's important to win over individuals and understand or identify which individuals have that appetite to learn a little bit more of security or are able to appreciate security. And that could be done in multiple ways. That could be done by security initially, right? So security lunch and learn sessions, brown bag sessions, having security office hours to say, hey, you have a question, come to us. And if there isn't anyone, we're going to talk about Pixie and then speak to them a little bit more in terms of, hey, would you be interested in doing this once a month? Every other week where you're learning something new, just like come in, let's do a tournament, see whether you're good at it, just like a competitive board. Start off a little bit, making it fun and an experience. At the same time, start getting buy-in from the leaders or the management teams in terms of here are engineers who are interested, who would be able to serve as security leaders within your teams. So you don't have to reach out to security. They know a thing or two. They'll have another career path if they choose to get into security. But at the same time, they're learning. And by sharing that or mentoring across their entire engineering team, we're winning the security battle, but at the same time, making the engineers more aware a full stack engineer should have security on his resume too, or her resume too. I mean, that's the way I would look at it. But I think that's where the world is going today, right? Every engineer should know a thing about security. That's what the security team can provide to an engineer. At the same time, the ask is that engineer is a true representative of the security team. He or she is able to participate in those meetings or in those forums, be able to bring in new issues, is signing up for reviewing all of the designs in the team for security issues, and having those discussions in terms of, hey, we're building out a new authentication layer. What do we need to do? We're building out new OAuth service. What do we need to do? They bring that up to security, and then we talk about important things. So that's how you scale, right? You have at least one security champion in each engineering team, and then going beyond that in each product management team, and so on and so forth. So far, we've talked about engineers. It's important for the product leaders, the visionaries of the product, and people who are in the growth sector as well, to keep thinking about security, what's out there, what's new in the market, what's important for our customers, and so on and so forth, and tie that there. That's how you expand and roll out a really successful security champions program.
So the concept makes perfect sense to me, and definitely sort of, security champions is one of the sort of one of the better and kind of, fairly well adopted approaches to scaling security. Do you run it as a program? Is there, you seem to have sort of clear definitions about what is it you expect the individuals to do it. So I guess kind of a couple of questions. One is, the individuals that sign up for it, do they need to get manager approval? Do they have actual kind of percentage of time allocated to it? And then related to that, is there an official, you have those meetings you mentioned and all of that, is there an official, do they do things together, the security champions, or are they purely extensions of the security team?
It's again a crawl, walk, run stage. In a fully functional security champions program, yes, there would be, that's like the North Star, is manager buy-in is required. Manager buy-in is a no-brainer. If you bring in people, say, hey, come sit in a meeting, this is what you get out of it, they would do it for maybe a month, maybe two. And then end of quarter deliverables come into play. No one's thinking about anything. The manager is not aware that the individual is committed to reviewing things. So everything will break down within 2 months of rolling out the program. It's good to get exposure, to get visibility, to get a quick understanding of who's interested in security at all, in terms of the program rollout, saying, hey, we're going to roll out this program. Here are the asks. Anyone's interested, come in. We do some fun stuff. For month one, that works great. Then once you identify those individuals, that's when you need to start putting together, here are the expectations of a security champion. Get that understood and agreed upon by the managers as well, and understand how we can quantify that or measure that. Being a data person, it's important for me to be able to measure whether the individual has been serving as a champion, and therefore has there been value given back to the team. So it's a bi-directional bucket, right? So we need metrics to quantify what success looks like from a security perspective for me and my team. Examples I would take is, for these key deliverables, each of them goes through a design review. The individual's been involved in code reviews for each of them. And we identify which ones could be more important from a security standpoint, how well the individual was able to capture the security requirements, how much of time put in by the security team versus by the individual on the security deliverables. Was the individual able to deliver security tests by himself, by herself, or teach others in the team to build those in? And therefore, when we expose these features out to either internal bounty programs or external bounty programs or a pen test, how many issues were identified? Those are some of the high-level metrics. I mean, of course, there are others that are internal to the teams, but high-level metrics you could start off with.
Yeah, no, perfect. Great metrics. We're kind of quickly evolving here on the time. So I want to maybe squeeze one more question, and then we have our kind of closing question to do it. You talked about, all this sort of great process and sort of changes and how you interact with development teams. One thing we didn't talk too much is about the people on the security team and the skills that they need to, or temperament or, mental kind of style to apply those. What is it that you look for in people you hire into the security team to apply this approach? And how does that differ in your mind to maybe who might have been hired a decade or so ago?
The security team has evolved over time too, in terms of what the requirements are for a security individual. The security individual today needs to also be a good salesperson. Unfortunately, that's the truth of lean security teams. In addition, of course, there's a no-brainer in terms of the security engineer needs to know security in terms of understanding what are security best practices, what are the big risk vectors, threat vectors, must have a background and experience in security. Other than that, progressively so, if a security engineer working closely with engineers needs to be a full stack developer as well, at least have experience as a full stack developer, at least has learned the Rails. I would rather have an application engineer with a good bend on security rather than a security engineer who knows nothing about application or infrastructure development. Issue is being fixed or the security issue is being addressed. It's difficult to find these individuals. Hiring a security person can take anywhere from 6 months to a year, a good security individual. But it's important to have those traits to be successful. Someone who's interested can be trained, but people who are getting to the security profession should be mindful of the fact that patience, soft skills, and a good understanding of application development are key to being successful in as much as knowing security is.
Yeah, just to sort of challenge a bit, it's hard to find these unicorns. I mean, it sounds like a great kind of hire, but if you think of so the soft skills, sales skills on one hand, on sort of application development skills and on maybe the security knowledge on it, which of these three, if you had to train on one of them, someone on a team, where would you compromise?
I'd say the sales pitch and the soft skills, I think, are easier to teach on the ground, right? You could always have mentors. You could always bring in external help to teach and train these individuals, as long as the individual is willing to.
Yeah. And they need to have some
willingness is what we would look for.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This has been super helpful conversation. I think like tons and tons of learnings for someone coming in and trying to sort of apply this change of how do you successfully engage the dev team, successfully shift left or whatever your term of choosing is. So Rupa, great insights there. Before I let you go, I have one open-ended question for you to maybe sort of share a view on. If you had unlimited budget, unlimited resources that you could apply to solve a problem in the industry, what would that problem be? And maybe if you have it, which direction would you take in trying to solve it?
If I had unlimited resources, I would focus on building out a tool that reduces alert fatigue, something that would bring in all of my alerts that are screaming and kicking from everywhere, put that in perspective and pipe out numbers in terms of here's the real risk or here's the approach. This is A, B, C in that order that I need to fix. It's easy to say than do because there are so many dimensions, but we're getting there. The industry is getting there, not there yet. And each of these, I'm not sure whether one company's tool would fit another company today, but we should be able to get to some level of standardization. Yes, there may be customizations needed. We should be able to get to some baselines that are better than we are right now.
Perfect. Thanks, Tam. That's definitely a worthy problem here to address, and kind of reduce some of this noise. Right? There are too many, probably even real security problems, but just with impact that's sort of, just a bit too small. And so we have to pick our battles. Rupa, this has been super insightful. Thanks again for coming on to the show.
It's my pleasure. Really great speaking with you, Guy.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. And I hope you join us for the next one.
Thanks for listening to The Secure Developer. That's all we have time for today. To find additional episodes and full transcriptions, visit thesecuredeveloper.com. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved in the community, find us on Twitter at @DevSecCon. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes if you enjoyed today's episode. Bye for now.